Hello, this is my graphic novel analysis of Anya's Ghost. It was written by Vera Broskell with illustrations by Colleen A.F. Venable and typeset design by John Martz. It's published by First Second and has a total page count of 221 pages. As you can see, it is a genuine graphic novel, not a compilation, and it is the debut novel by Vera Broskell. Something I found interesting when I was researching this was the protagonist, Anya, is actually based off of Broskell herself and her struggles as a Russian immigrant to the United States when she was a child. It has your basic 3-act structure with Act 1 ending and Act 2 beginning on page 38. So here we see our protagonist Anya and antagonist Emily have met and formed their bond, their relationship, which in the beginning actually starts out very friendly and kind. You know, Emily is a lonely ghost who is looking for a new friend, and Anya is kind of an outcast at school. She doesn't really have many friends, so the two hit it off immediately and form a bond. Then on page 157, we have the transition from Act 2 to Act 3. So here we see Anya has learned that Emily has more sinister intentions. You know, she's not just a lonely girl looking for a friend. She's actually looking to take over Emily's life. Or take over Anya's life, excuse me. And this leads Anya to realize that she's going to have to confront Emily in order to keep her own life. So that leads us into Act 3, which is, of course, the final confrontation between the protagonist and antagonist. And then that, of course, leads to our resolution. The story has a complete arc with the beginning, middle, and end, and I found the resolution to be very satisfactory. You know, in the end, we have the protagonist defeats the antagonist, and the protagonist learns a lesson, which is very popular in young adult novels for the protagonist to learn some kind of valuable life lesson that they'll hold on for the rest of their lives, and this is considered to be a young adult novel and marketed towards teenagers more. Now, both the protagonist and the antagonist actually have very solid character arcs, which I found interesting. You know, a lot of times you don't always see a very good character arc in your antagonist. They just kind of stay that anti-force the entire time, and Emily actually changes. So, in our antagonist, you know, in the beginning, Emily acts very nice and sweet, but in reality, it's her goal to take over Anya's life. And she continues, you know, her devious behavior and mischievous behavior, trying to hurt Anya's family, until the end, when she finally kind of comes to the realization that no matter how unsatisfactory her life was, it's not fair of her to try to take over Anya's. And this comes during that final conflict between the two, when Anya finally kind of yells at Emily pretty much and makes her realize that it's not fair for her to take away Anya's life just because hers was taken away. Which is here is actually that scene. And so her character arc is there. It's a little bit more subtle than the protagonist. Anya's character arc is much more defined. As the protagonist, you would expect that. You know, she starts as, you know, your typical teenage girl. You know, she worries about, you know, other people's opinions and, you know, how she looks and how everyone else views her instead of worrying about how she views herself and her own self-worth. And as it goes on, she learns to value herself as a person, that, you know, she's never going to make true friends until she starts acting like herself instead of trying to act how she thinks everyone else wants her to act. which is that valuable life lesson, as I said, most young adult books have, is, you should learn to be yourself instead of trying to be someone else. I felt the story had very effective transitions. I always knew where I was, location-wise, the time of day, the characters involved, what was happening in the story. One thing that Broskull and Venable tend to do for transitions, especially time transitions, are splash pages. So this is a great example of, this shows the night before, and then it takes us into the next morning. I thought it was a great use of splash pages. It keeps it interesting and light, and it also keeps our flow up while doing the time transition that you need. Another thing that they do is use kind of like a fantasy sequence of sorts. Anya, typical teenage girl, she fantasizes about her future, about her crush. And so here, it's like on the bottom of this page, we have Anya in school. Then she fantasizes about her crush and the party they're going to this weekend. And then we see, as it transitions and bleeds out of the fantasy, it's Anya in her room trying on clothes for the party. I found it very interesting that they used the fantasy sequence, and I also found it relatable, especially with it being a young adult book marketed towards more teenagers. What teenagers haven't fantasized about their school crush, or a big party coming up over the weekend and things like that. So I thought their transitions were done very well and very cleanly. I think the story makes great use as, the page is a mini comic idea. And I thought it worked really effectively, actually. Each page here, kind of has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, at the end of each page, it's not really a cliffhanger, but it's between the dialogue and the illustrations, it keeps up the momentum enough that you want to know what happens on the next page. You want to keep reading. I sat down and read this book in about one sitting because I found it very interesting, and the pacing to just be very on key. It's a bit fast, but it works. Because between the illustrations, especially the facial expressions, you'll get pages that have absolutely no dialogue on them, and even then, the action and facial expressions and the illustrations keep the pacing and timing very, very well. I think the story makes great use of the directional flow. The art, the layout, the text, all of it really helps pull the reader through to each page, especially the art, I think. Even just the smallest of panels, just seeing Anya's facial expressions, or just when it has just one little line of dialogue. It's done so well and timed so well that it just keeps the reader flowing onto the next panel, to the next page, the next page. Very well. The reader is engaged the entire time. As I said, I found the story to be very relatable to the market that it's in. And I also like the way that the author, especially, mixed kind of 3 different genres into one. There's horror, there's mystery, and there's also a lot of comedy. But they each flow. It's not like, it starts as a comedy and ends as a horror. They flow together and to make a very, very tight graphic novel. And I think they did a very nice job with all of it. I found the book to be extremely entertaining and would recommend it to anyone, especially those who, as I said, have maybe a darker sense of humor and enjoy, a little mystery with comedy thrown in or horror thrown in. And this has been my analysis. Thank you very much.